This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series is brought to you by Malois Transport and AssurAction Transport Expert. For oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec, visit www.malois-transport.ca. And for an expert and professional trucking insurance firm specializing in property and casualty insurance solutions for freight across Quebec, Canada, and the United States, visit www.transportexpert.com. Good evening, or good afternoon, good morning to wherever you are in the world then, ladies and gents. Here to round 5 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malois Transport and AssurAction Transport Expert. As always, I am Regan Clark, and you join us here just into the second half of the season as we exit the midway mark at Donington, here at the mighty Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, a historic jewel of Italian motorsports. The Imola circuit was founded in 1953, consistent of 19 turns and 3 miles, just over, as a matter of fact, of FIA Grade 1. A brilliantly designed circuit with quite a lot of history. Started its life as a motorcycle racing circuit, made its way into the Formula 1 Grand Prix calendar, 2 non-championship races in 1963 and 1979. That was won by Jim Clark and Niki Lauda, respectively, before joining the championship proper from 1980 onwards. Of course, was the site of the one of the most tragic events of motorsports history, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, in which we lost Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna. That fundamentally reshaped how Imola would be designed heading into the turn of the millennium. In the modern day, then, Imola prevails as a bastion of European endurance racing excellence, hosting rounds of the European Le Mans Series and World Endurance Championship. In regards to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, which is the final acting name of what was formerly the San Marino Grand Prix, it's been shelved for 2026 onwards, with 2025 being its last year in operation for Formula 1 for the foreseeable future. It hosts round 5 of the championship, however, and as we head, of course, into that second half of the season, it makes the mark here of one of our final appearances of the standard 60-minute race, the last of which we'll be seeing at the season finale, also in Italy, over at the Misano World Circuit Marco Simoncelli, for round 8 of the championship. Between that, we've got a double set of sprint races, double sprints, as a matter of fact, 30-minute races for round 6 and 7, Watkins Glen and the Circuit Zolder in the next 2 rounds to follow. Right now, though, we're on board with Timo de Tosto, and what a championship it has been so far. Where do we pick up from, then? Off of the exit of the Donington double sprint? Well, it was quite a peculiar result, because the top 4 positions were all claimed in both races, mind you, by the same 4 people. It was a 1-2-3-4 finish in both races by Christian Lebay, Giovanni Badiali, Anthony Valorio, and Kevin Quain. The top 5 was exchanged briefly between Richard Cecil for race 1 and Byron Forrest for race 2. 6th place was Byron Forrest in race 1, and then in the second race was Carl Martel. 7th place is another story entirely, because it was Martel for race 1 and John Prine for race 2. The results continue to spiral down there, but it was quite a mixed bag outside of what was an otherwise dominant top 4 flourish from those 4 drivers earlier on. Looking into the previous wins of the championship then after Donington, it's still a one-man story. Christian Lebay now 6 race wins in a row. Really does seem to be the case here heading into the second half of the championship. He seems unstoppable, as proven time in and time out. 4 weeks in a row now we have seen the Chevrolet at the top step of the podium after every single race. I don't believe it shows any real signs of stopping here in round 5 of the championship. On board then with De Tosto, on his way down towards the Variante Tamburello. Now, De Tosto was peculiarly enough a no-show for round 4 of the championship, did not make his way into either of the 2 races being ran at the Donington Park circuit last Tuesday. It would be last Wednesday for us here in the recording studio. And it's good to see him back on track here as he looks to pick up the pieces here and get back on to the charge of things in the grand scheme of things, as he has dropped several positions for not appearing. And onto the subject of that, into the championship standings, Christian Lebay leads with 170 points. That's quite the dominant lead indeed when you consider it's 38 points to the nearest car. Anthony Valorio in second, himself 10 points ahead of Giovanni Badiali, now up to the podiums, and 13 points ahead of Byron Forrest in 4th. Carl Martel only a single set of 4 points behind there to round out that top 5. Kevin Quain not too far behind him by 11 points. He's in 6th. Timo de Tosto having dropped down to 7th for missing out in Donington. Nonetheless, he's still 5 points ahead of Richard Cecil, and rounding out the top 10, we have a joint 9th place position here between Liam Bello and John Prine at 53 points apiece. Looking into balance of performance coming into today's race, we'll find that Aston Martin are the only ones really smiling ear to ear for this race. The V8 Vantage losing 10 kilos. Chevrolet will be gaining 8. Mercedes on the screen at the moment, the number 58 of Timo de Tosto, will be gaining 13 kilos. McLaren gaining 20 and Porsche gaining 22. Porsche really cannot seem to catch a break in this championship. They've been on the short end of the stick for BOP week in, week out since the season premiere all the way back in Laguna Seca. Looking around that field, we were on board with De Tosto for a while. See here, Byron Forrest now third fastest in free practice. Now, I am hotly awaiting the arrival of qualifying today, ladies and gents, because I have quite the juicy bit of data to divulge, as this is one of the closest qualifying grids I believe we may have ever seen in our time on TRTN, and moreover, over the course of this championship, it has been its closest we've ever seen. More onto that in about 13.5 minutes when we get onto the story of qualifying today. Looking at the news then, a very early news segment for today as we follow on board with Byron Forrest on his way out of Tosa Curve. Next up will be the full track tour before the end of free practice today. On to news though. In the World Rally Championships, Toyota Gazoo Racing breaks the all-time win record over Citroën, taking 103 wins, with its 103rd being claimed by Sebastian Ogier, who won in Rally Chile Bio Bio. He finished ahead of his teammates at the Toyota Gazoo Racing team. Moreover, he now leads the championship ahead of Elfyn Evans by 2 points. So an incredibly tight margin as we head into the final couple of rounds in the 2025 World Rally Championship. And while Rally 1 is still yet to be decided, it's not the same story down in Rally 2. Oliver Solberg, son of Petter Solberg, the 2003 World Rally Champion, has now taken his own very championship down in Rally 2. He won the WRC2 Championship, securing his drive then in Rally 1 for 2026, as we saw already what he's capable of behind the wheel at Rally Estonia. Since that was 3 years off from when he last touched Rally 1 machinery, it's looking very promising for Solberg coming into the next season of competition. Then transferring over from World Rally over to the story of something rather recent and developing today, and that is of Formula E. Now, we spoke earlier on last week, as a matter of fact, over the recent progress regarding Citroën Racing's formal entry into the FIA Formula E Championship. Getting ahead of ourselves there. I don't think they're going to be doing that anytime soon. At the FIA Formula E Championships. And now we finally get a look at their lineup for Season 12. They signed Jean-Eric Vergne and Nick Cassidy for Season 12 of the Championship, and they'll be replacing fellow Stellantis Mark Maserati on the grid for 2026. What does that necessarily mean? Well, it means they'll be competing alongside their sister team, as it were, the DS Autos team. DS Penske, as it's known on the grid, as they paired up with Penske for the backbone support of their team. They've been a very prominent face in Formula E over the last couple of seasons. Jean-Eric Vergne himself, as a matter of fact, most prominently drove for that team, now makes the jump across to the big mark at Citroën Racing. This is going to make for a very interesting spectacle, as we've already seen Citroën Racing's promotional material would have us believe not only is Formula E in the iron sights, but a potential return to rallying in the near future is definitely up for consideration. So this is going to be an exciting time for Citroën and for Stellantis coming into the next couple of years. We've also spoken as well on one of Stellantis' other projects, that being from Lancia, the Ypsilon HF Integrale Rally 2, being revealed most recently to compete at next year's World Rally Championship. So onwards and upwards in the industry, so it seems, and it seems like constant momentum for the European marques. Speaking of European marques, Porsche, despite that less than beneficial BOP package, bringing that back up again 22 kilos, really doesn't seem to have phased Byron Forrest all too much. He maintains a top 5 position in the free practice times of today, with just about 10 minutes left to go. Let's see where he stacks up here. De Tosto second, Labay unsurprisingly leading the charge. Fun fact as well, Christian Labay holds the currently regulated world record for GT4 here in Imola in that 119 Chevrolet under these BOP standards. So if that gives you any indication as to where he'll be finishing today, I don't really know what will. So, De Tosto second, Vilorio third, Byron Forrest remains fourth. Fabiano Bartoletti. Now, this was a very interesting story from last week. Bartoletti has been on the rise here in terms of his development. Having a look at his last couple of results, he finally secured his first top 10 finish at the second race of Donington, having only entered from round 3 onwards. Bartoletti finished 14th in that race, 14th in the first of 2 races at Donington, but that second race is where we really got to see the 26 come into its own. as it secured its first top 10 finish. Proper solid points on the chart for Bartoletti. Right now, he's down in 18th for the championship, rather unsurprisingly given how late in he has entered this championship. But this seems to be a great sign of upwards momentum here. Now, whether or not we'll see him enter into the upcoming, I believe it's the Jaguar Special Series that they're conducting on the Competizione Performance League. That'll be scheduled for, I believe, judging off of times here, I think it's going to be Sunday mornings Eastern Standard Time. For us here in the commentary box, that's about mid-afternoon, so we'll still be there, hopefully, to cover that. Whether or not we see Bartoletti compete in there is another story entirely. We can definitely see signs of great progress on the horizon here for the number 26. We do have as well, so I just want to hop onto the discussion very quickly. We take a look elsewhere. This is into the session regs today. Of course, we're back into the 60-minute format for round 5 of the championship, so 20 minutes of qualifying coming up and a single 60-minute race. We also have some new drivers for today, among them Julio Bahena, who's already out on track. We'll catch on board with the number 18 in a moment's time. We also have Caleb Kelly and Hayden Prodger, a very familiar face to those of our viewers over from NLRL. Just take a look around the field here. We'll be able to get a look as we cut away back onto the main feed. Here is Julio Bahena, currently 7th then. The number 18 makes his debut here in round 5 of the championship in the second McLaren in this championship after Valorio. So that is a very rare sight indeed. For the longest time, Anthony Valorio maintains the mark as the only McLaren driver here in the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, but Bahena looks to break the mold here by joining the ranks of Woking Surrey's finest machinery, that being the McLaren 570S. Fantastic little motor that, and we've seen in the hands of Valorio, it is quite a punchy machine indeed. So for Bahena, and this is not the first time, sorry, I should say, that we have seen Bahena before. We've seen Bahena on our screens back in the, I think it was season 2 of the NLRL Sunday League. He competed, I believe, I want to say with Ford Performance. So down here in GT4, one would have expected perhaps Chevrolet is the closest comparator if he was looking for muscle, but he prefers that European agility the McLaren brings to the table. Clearly, it seems to be paying off, because already in the first couple of laps Bahena's done today, he's inside the top 10. Now he's just been squeezed down from 7th to 8th there after across the line was the number 99, that being Carl Martel, one of several Chevrolets on this grid. Every day we creep closer and closer to having an all Chevrolet grid. By that point, you could call it V8 supercars. For Bahena, let's see what he can do here. We can see even in free practice, the margins are incredibly tight, and I cannot wait to pick apart the predicted top 10 for today, because it is one of the greatest data sets I think I've ever received in regards to qualifying predictions. It's going to be a very interesting day ahead of us then, ladies and gents, here as we head into season 1's second half. So Bahena to the line has to make about, looking at it here, 83 thousandths of a second for an improvement. And while he doesn't find that, he does bring the gap down to about 200ths of a second between himself and Fabiano Bartoletti. Meanwhile, up front, that gap only continues to rise between Lebay and De Tosto. 1.665 seconds, I should say. Anthony Valorio next to the line here, the number 41. Can he break the mold up ahead of De Tosto to take that front row at the end of free practice today? He crosses the line, and sadly no improvement this time around. He also finds himself precariously close to Byron Forrest in 4th. This could make for a very early warning sign here as to what to expect coming into quali today. Clinton Bourne in the top 5 at the moment in the number 6 Chevy. And now we discussed Bartoletti, I want to discuss Bourne as well, because Clinton Bourne, since having left Audi at the season opener at Laguna Seca, has been on a real rise to fame here in the number 6. He has really taken that Chevrolet under his wing, and that car just seems to be working so much better for him by contrast to how things were with the Audi. I think it's quite a common sight we saw back in Laguna Seca was him wrestling that machine into submission. It really does seem to be the case here, where he's much, much better suited to the Chevy. So much more comfortable. See, he was heading down into Aqua Minerale. Very little trouble there for Clinton Bourne. So we want to try and get a look on board with a driver here. to get a full comprehensive tour of this magnificent circuit. So who better to get on board with then than Julio Bahena, one of the new drivers for today. The number 18 will be our tour guide here in the Autodromo Internazionale, I should say, Enzo Idino Ferrari. So out of turn 19 we go then immediately into what is turn 1 on our run down towards the Variante Tambirello. That's turns 2, 3 and 4. Now in the last Imola race we covered, that was over on the MSC Club, I think it was the Clubman Series or Club Sports Series in GT3, what we covered last Friday. It was quite a hectic time at this section of the track. That was up in the GT3s. The GT4s will be able to play with just a little bit more space than their bigger brothers up in GT3. Heading down into turns 5 and 6 of the Variante Villeneuve. This complements the Variante Tambirello quite nicely there in Sector 1, allows the drivers to slow down for the first of their major attacking spots here at Tosa Curve. Now, contrary to most of these hairpin corners we see around European tracks, this one, instead of going downhill, like for example, corners like La Source, or even on a bit more of a nuanced scale, you can make the argument the more open style hairpin corners like, for example, Stowe at Silverstone, that one goes uphill. So now we're out through Piratella, and this runs downhill. It really does play into the verticality of Imola in that middle sector. It does make for almost a roller coaster like experience for drivers on hot lap. Out through Acqua Minerale then, that real compression zone out through turns 12 and 13. Very, very easy for the car to step away in that area. It's a curved braking zone down into a very sharp turn, so you've really got to modulate the brakes here in these GT3s. Out through the Variante Alta, turns 14 and 15. Very easy to upset the balance of the car then on either of those two sausage curbs, playing direct parallels then to another famous Italian track, the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza, namely the Variante Retafilo. That incredibly high set of sausage curbs. Out through Ravazza then at turn 17 and 18 to bring us to the end of this lap. Julio Bahena currently gunning for an improvement, and we bring the telemetry up here just before the line. He's 4/10ths up, so it's definitely going to be a position north of where he's at right now. He's 9th as he gets his way to the line. It just drops down to about 3/10, but that's enough for 8th for Bahena at the end of that lap. And a very warm thank you to Julio Bahena for being our unofficial tour guide here of Imola. Just see here with Anthony Valorio wrestling the car through Ravazza. Now, he shed a lot of time away there just before we opened up the telemetry. That was looking in and around an improvement of 0.2 of a second. Now, whether or not that would be close enough to catch up to what is a currently jaw-dropping time by Christian Lebay is another question entirely. But struggles down at Ravazza for McLaren deny him the opportunity for a personal improvement, and perhaps braking there. You can see he's only 0.002 off of braking into the 150s. Right now, still straggling the line between 150 and 151. Albert on his way to the line here. Had it not been for the fact he's on an invalidated lap, I'd say that's a sizable improvement, enough to perhaps even put him inside the top 10, but he'll have to go around the track one more time. See one of the new drivers from last race, Richard Lynch, in the number 63. Now, he had a sizable outing, all things considered, in that last race gone. 13th and 11th in Donington, was playing things relatively safe, wasn't trying to get himself into too much trouble. But in those double sprint races, trouble often finds you before you go looking for it. So for Lynch, now heading into his first 60-minute race, he may have a real opportunity then to start playing into the strategic side of things here. Of course, that mandatory pit stop creeping its way back in for the 60-minute races as per the regulations for round 5. Down through Piratella then goes Lynch. We'll catch up with him later on. Checking in there with the start of the flying lap for Christophe Dupois, the number 39. On his way down now out of Tambirello and down towards Villeneuve. So looking at those timing charts here as we get towards the end of free practice, very quickly onto the discussion of quali in a moment's time. Lebay leads the timing charts now by a narrowed. It was 1.6, it's now 1.2 seconds between himself and Anthony Valorio. And at this very moment in the lap before, we did capture his struggles over Ravazza down at turns 17 and 18, I should say, as he exits turn 19 now. Will it be an improvement into that sub-second margin? He's so close there, but not close enough at the end of free practice. But that's a good sign for Valorio heading into qualifying. Itosto currently third fastest, but here comes the very last second lunge by Giovanni Badiali. Now, he snuck under the radar all through free practice today, and also to discuss his results, it was 2 second place finishes in a row at Donington. That's what's put him up to third in the championship. So Badiali has yet got a chance here for a potential race win on the horizon. With 60 minutes of racing coming up after today's qualifying, there's definitely some opportunities in the books here for Badiali and Villorio, but they're going to have to bank on a seemingly impossible odds for Lebay to run into some kind of trouble. With 6 race wins in a row this season, I find it very hard to believe. But we've seen even stranger things happen here on TRTN, so let's not rule this out for definite. Next to the line comes the number 39, Christophe Dupois. And that brings us to the end of free practice. So almost immediately then, on to qualifying. 20 minutes on the charts today. Immediately barreling out of the pits. You can see it's quite the squeeze here between Badiali, Lebay and Bahena as they become our first 3 on their way out of the pit. So nice spry and early start there for Bahena. Now, he's not wasting any time in today. He's got a real opportunity to make a mark on the rest of this grid. I think he's giving some space there to the approaching Mercedes of Gabriel Gaudreau, so we'll see what Bahena does later on today. But the first of our 2 drivers out onto the track, Christian Lebay and Giovanni Badiali, a double front row finish then between the pair of them at Donington last week. Let's see what they can do then heading into qualifying today, and I am so excited to start picking apart some of the data here, because frankly, you have to see it to believe it. Looking at those qualifying predictions, I want to speak more namely not only on just how far the gap is between Christian Lebay and Kevin Quain. Now, this is up at around 1.1 seconds. It's 1,105 milliseconds precisely. That's 1 second, 1/10, and 5 thousandths. I want to talk more on what is going on behind Lebay and Quain, and namely for Quain down to 10th. So from 2nd to 10th, this is where we really start to have minds blown here. Now, that gap from P2 to P3, that is 188 milliseconds. That is a 10th, 808 thousandths of a second. The gap from 3rd to 4th is 17 milliseconds. That's 107 thousandths. The gap from 4th to 5th is 373 milliseconds. That's about 3/10. That's our second largest gap on this entire top 10 chart, by the way. And then we are almost immediately juxtaposed for that gap between 5th and 6th. Richard Cecil and Timo de Tosto are separated on this grid, according to qualifying predictions, by 5 thousandths of a second. Try to wrap your head around that. Now, I'll get further onto the rest of this as well. Looking from 6th then into 7th, that's 177 milliseconds, a 10th, 707 thousandths. Then we have the gap from 7th to 8th. That's 500ths of a second, or 50 milliseconds. The gap from 8th to 9th, 193 milliseconds. And the gap from 9th to 10th, 190 milliseconds. Now, if you want to take this on a much more literal standpoint here, as we see Lebay start the first of his flying laps, we'll stay on board then with Christian Lebay over the course of the first of our flying laps today in quali. I want to just dig your brain a little bit, because I went and did some research just to see how close these times were to something a little bit more rooted in reality. What's something we do all the time? We do about, I think about 15 to 20 times a minute there, but actually 50 to 20 times about every 30 seconds for some people, and that's blinking. Blinking can take about 100 to 150 milliseconds. Okay, so what I'm getting at with this is for at least 3 occasions in this top 10, namely the gap between 3rd to 4th, 5th to 6th, and 7th to 8th, it is quite literally blink and you miss it. That is how close we are looking in today's qualifying. Now, I went and looked a little further out from this, and that is for the human reaction time. Now, I previously had it speculated it was in and around 144 thousandths of a second there, 144 milliseconds to be more precise. And as it turns out, a bit more of a net average is up at about 200 to 300 milliseconds, or about 2 to 3/10 of a second. That means you want to take a look here. All but 2 examples in this top 10 are so close to one another, it circumvents the natural order of reaction for a human being. That is how close we are dealing with here. On most of them, you're not even going to be able to react to how close the gap is, let alone see it, because for 3 of them, you're not even going to be able to see it if you blink. So that is how close we are dealing with. That's how close the gaps are that we are dealing with in today's qualifying. So, down towards the line then, the first of our times on the chart today, coming from Christian Lebay, already 1.4 seconds up on his times in free practice. So that is quite the haymaker start for the 119. A 150.137 is our fastest time so far, as he sets in the benchmark time. Now looking next to see who's across the line, it's the number 2 and the number 6 there, number 3, sorry, and the number 6, Gabriel Gaudreau and Clinton Bourne. Then next to the line went the number 41. That was Anthony Velorio to start a flying lap. Julio Bahena on his way to the line there to start a flying lap in the number 18 McLaren. The number 58 Timo de Tosto couldn't find a valid time in that last lap gone. So with 5 minutes already burned into today's session, de Tosto is starting on a lower note than he'd like, having to go another lap around the track before he sees any times on the chart. Speaking of times, here comes Byron Forrest then for the second fastest time by 1.4 seconds on the charts right now. Then having crossed the line but a moment ago, Fabiano Bartoletti gets across the line for the 4th fastest time. So a bit of a slower start here. Lynch across the line for 6th fastest. Then next to the line at the moment, I believe it's either the 39 as a matter of fact. The 36 is on that same stretch of the track, but Christophe Dupois moves over for the arrival there of Richard Cecil. Number 5 then to the line. We saw that Aston Martin get its hands full over the course of the last 2 races at Donington. Cecil, though, crosses the line without a valid time. Albert doesn't make the same mistake, though. He's across the line and into that top 5 in the number 36. Then the 99 comes Carl Martel across the line, so another Chevrolet onto the field here, and he goes 7th fastest there, puts himself ahead of the number 63 of Lynch. But he's behind Gaudreau and Albert there for the control of the last of those top 5 positions. The number 998 is next to the line. Here comes Giovanni Badiali, a serious heavy hitter in qualifying. Let's see what Badiali can do. Down to the line. Where does he land himself? Second fastest by under half a second. The number 119 is next. So Lebay, is he looking to extend the margins? And he absolutely does by putting it nearly double where the mark was, actually a little over double where the mark was set originally by Badiali. That was about 0.4 of a second. It is now over 0.9 after that last lap just gone. Really hammering the point home here that no one is coming along to challenge that pole position off of Lebay. He has got this absolutely locked. So with under 14 minutes to go, Velorio now 3rd fastest, but he's squeezed out by Timo de Tosto by only, looking at it there, I want to do the rough maths in my head, that's about 35 thousandths of a second. That is incredibly close. So it wasn't just theory that gets you this far in terms of the predictions. They really are this close to one another on track. Quain, now 5th fastest after his last lap gone, puts himself only a few, by the looks of it here, about 200 and I want to say 242 milliseconds there from Velorio in 4th. So that is still very close, all things considered. Now, of course, in comparison to some of the gaps we saw theoretically, you're talking, well, 5 thousandths of a second. Now, we've seen that in execution. We've seen that in a qualifying session before. Whether it's here or if it's in another series, we know statistically it's possible. Having crossed the line a moment ago, Richard Cecil now 7th fastest with Aston Martin, but then squeezed down to 8th there with the arrival of Carl Martel, now up to 6th in the number 99. It's a primarily European top 5 right now. Chevrolet only with 1 car inside, but it's in the most powerful position at play here. That is pole position still for Chevrolet. The Camaro in enemy territory then. It's in the land of the European machines here. Well, if there were any Ferraris on the field, not that there are competing in any GT4 series I've come to know of, but I imagine they'd be very upset right now. Right now, for the remainder of those podium positions, it seems to be only talk from Mercedes. McLaren, actually, no, they do have something yet to say. Across the line goes Velorio, so I may have to eat humble pie on my assumptions that Mercedes would be occupying the remainder of the podium here. A little too early to call, and we're not even at the halfway mark of qualifying today. Velorio then to 3rd fastest. De Tosto crosses the line and cannot match it on the last lap just gone. So the 58 out on another lap at the moment. And as we see across the line, Quain usurps 4th position off of Timo de Tosto, going up to 4th there. And by looking at it here, by about 83 thousandths of a second. So, drivers we've yet to see times out of. Julio Bahena, one of the new drivers today. We've also yet to see times from Christophe Dupois or Andrew Veldkamp in today's session. So, as we get towards the halfway mark of today's qualifying, we've just seen on the timing charts there, sadly we couldn't see him across the line, but Richard Cecil up to 7th fastest. The 99 is on his way, so here comes Carl Martel. We have been able to catch this one, and across the line goes Martel, but not to a top 5 just yet. The 616 of Veldkamp finally puts a time on the charts. It's 14th fastest, and not too far off that to the number 63 of Richard Lynch in 13th. So still definitely chances here for Veldkamp for a position improvement by the end of today's quali. The 998's across the line. We just seen Badiali, and he does bring the gap down another 0.4 of a second, now getting closer and closer to being under that half-second margin to Christian Lebay. Now, as we know, the Chevys, and we saw this back in Donington, the Chevys generate this almost vortex zone that everyone tries to go in for on the race start. I think that owes not only to how great the machine is off the line, but just how tuned in a driver like Christian Lebay is for race starts. He's not making any kind of mistakes here. He's earned that lead. He's looking to keep it by turn 1. And as we saw back in Donington on our way to Redgate, it does create this little vacuum right behind him, of which drivers try to exploit. We saw, especially in the side-by-side action between Badiali and Villorio, that was really quite something to behold. It was chess and not checkers there, trying to surf the line of the race leader. Now, one does wonder, with a much longer run down towards the first major braking zone, as opposed to how things were in Donington, a very short run down to Redgate. This is actually a sizable run by comparison down towards the Variante Tambirello, and it's a corner you'll be going in at much greater speeds than Redgate. Could we be seeing the what would be the best word for it, really? What could we see the playmaking of last round, or last 2 races of last round, come back into it here? A little bit of that tacticianry from the top 3. And as we can see, it's the same 2 drivers again here. So Villorio will be lining up right behind Lebay, as it stands right now, being on the odd numbers and being on that second row. He'll be lining alongside Quain, but he'll be right behind that 119, meaning Badiali is caught out here. He's caught without a line, knowing the Mercedes, yes, it's grand for acceleration, but it just cannot match what the boys in Lansing, Michigan have been able to bring along with that Chevy Camaro. It is really quite a brute there. The boys at Pratt Miller Engineering have really worked the same kind of magic that led the C6R to dominate GT1 back in the day, and they put their heart and soul into the GT4R, and that 6th generation Chevrolet Camaro. Almost makes you wonder what things could have been like here on ACC if they continue to update GT4 and gave us the same 7th generation Mustang GT4 that's now made its way onto iRacing. To see those 2 side by side would really be a sight to behold. 8 minutes left to go then here in qualifying for round 5 of the championship. Lebay still leads, and by just over half a second. Villorio and Badiali closer to each other than either of them are to pole position. Kevin Quain comes across the line here in 4th, maintains his position by, as it stands, another 83 milliseconds there to Timo de Tosto, who rounds out the top 5. Carl Martel then, the next of the Chevrolets, down in 6th, gets usurped for 6th there by the imminent arrival of Byron Forrest, who's punching well above the balance of performance weight given to that Porsche. That 22 kilos has not affected the performance of Byron Forrest today. He has been really quite a trooper over the course of the season. Now, it's a bit of a taboo choice, as it's quite quickly becoming here in GT4, that Porsche, just because of how many times, week in, week out, that car just gets absolutely decimated for BOP. But drivers like Forrest can just make it work, so it makes you wonder if he ever gets his hands on some more top-of-the-line machinery that handles anywhere near the level that the Porsche does, as he's clearly got a preference here for the machine. Now, otherwise, we would have seen, like with a few different occasions across GT4, drivers just changing out vehicles and it paying off. One such example is actually for a driver who is supposed to be joining us today, Hayden Prodger, who's changed his choice in GT4 machinery twice over the course of his career, and it's paid off both times. Boris clearly has a preference for that Porsche, and he's sticking with it. I mean, that is a bit of, what do they say? It's a ride-or-die mentality, and he's deathly loyal to Porsche, so it seems. It's paid off, though. You can't say that it hasn't, because Forrest right now sits in the top 5 of the championship. He's been a real trooper through the last couple of races. I mean, having a look at some of the results here for Forrest, he's 4th in the championship now. He made both of those runs in Donington inside the top 6. He was 6th in the first race, 5th in the next. His best result this season has happened twice, as a matter of fact, and that's a 4th, which he's got in Laguna Seca for that opening round, and which he got in the first of 2 races ran at Alton Park. His worst result this season on that drop point system, which, by the way, has been brought in to eliminate 1 round as opposed to the 2 we've seen in other series we've covered here that use the drop point system. His worst result was 7th. So it is really a story of brutal consistency. And as a matter of fact, it does hearken quite close to and draws quite a lot of parallels to another story for one such driver on this field for the first times that he ever made his way onto the big screen here on TRTN, and that's for Christian Lebay back in season 1 of the Sunday League on NLRL. He had a much similar story to what we're seeing out of Byron Forrest, and if Byron Forrest continues to chip away at his craft like this, there's nothing to say that he can't take home a championship by the end of this year. And if it's not this year, I've definitely got, I've got money on the table here for Byron Forrest getting a championship by the end of 2026. If he's moving the way that he's moving, if he's got that kind of grit, he's got that kind of commitment to the car, he's just been, what's the word really that's best going for it? He's sort of been pounding away at things here, making that car work for him. And same story as well for Kevin Quain. We also saw him come out of the Sunday League. And I hate to keep bringing it up, but obviously here on TRTN, it's one of the oldest series we've had in circulation. It's actually where we've seen a lot of these drivers for the first time ever. And same story for Kevin Quain. He's really been another up-and-comer here. And in GT4, he's really come into his own, as we've seen with plenty of other drivers on this field. So as we draw into the final 5 minutes of today's session, here comes Giovanni Battiali to the line, the number 998. Still just over half a second out as he crosses the line. Still no improvement there. So close yet so far away for control of pole position. Christian Lebay still leads that charge with one of the only, actually yes, the only 149 of the session so far. Ooh, big step out there for the 41. We knew that was going to happen to someone. I imagine Valorio is beside himself on the fact that it's happened to him first and foremost. Do expect that to kick off somewhere in the race as well. It's only a matter of time, and it's almost too close to draw, really, that it's going to happen. Same story down at Tamburello. These are two inevitabilities whenever you run a race out of Imola. Someone stacks it over the Variante Alta. Someone stacks it over the Variante Tamburello. It's just going to happen. So down to the line, Valorio. Burnt on that last time. He'll have to go around the track for a couple more. Feasibly looking at 2 more laps before the end of quali today. And also out on track, just having exited the Variante Alta. Now on his way to Ravazza is Christian Lebay. I mean, looking at the statistics for Lebay this season, it is alien. There's something is not regular about this kind of performance, folks. I have never seen anything in my time that quite accurately describes the dominance we've seen over the course of not even all the way through this season. We're only just into the second half, and he shows no signs of slowing down. Looking at this here, those previous wins by Lebay, it has just been utter domination. Not a single person has been able to stand eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder, and challenge the 119 so far. And it almost makes one live for the day someone can, because that will truly be an epic display. Because the moment we can find a driver that can drive a Camaro like this man here, all hell will undoubtedly break loose. So a whole swath of drivers out on the track at the moment. We see this huge log of traffic down to the Variante Villeneuve. Among them, we can see is Giovanni Battiali. We can also see the 22 of John Prine in and amongst it. And behind him there, that bright yellow Aston Martin of Fabiano Bartoletti. Bartoletti, I will say, is still close to a top 10 start. You look at the margins there, and that is absolutely razor thin. You are talking, so from point A to point B here, from 10th down to 12th. Now, this is all the margin that Bartoletti, or for that matter, Prine needs to clear. Prine's actually got the slightly easier task here, as he's only got a, looking at it here, 12 thousandths of a second gap between himself and Alex Albert, who rounds out the last of the top 10 for Fabiano Bartoletti. He's got a little bit of a wider gap. You're talking, by the looks of it here, about, now I want to play my cards right and say this is about 25 thousandths of a second between all three of these positions here, judged by less than a quarter of a tenth of a second. It is absolutely mind-boggling. And same still for the gap at the back of that top 5, because Timo de Tosto and Kevin Quain, both in the Mercedes, are divided from one another by 5 thousandths of a second. So that 5 thousandths of a second margin that was spoke of only in theory has come to fruition. The question therein remains as we draw onto the final laps of qualifying, is it going to stay that way? Knowing how fine the gap is, knowing that you would have to thread a camel through the eye of a needle to make that gap stick. Who comes out on top then? Is it too close yet too far away for Quain? He's across the line, and seemingly so. This is his last opportunity to get in on that margin because De Tosto is still out on track. He's on his way out through Piratella and invalidates his time. So that's the end of the line for Timo De Tosto. It rests on the shoulders then of Kevin Quain to potentially breach that top 4. But I would not count out this driver as well. Byron Forrest, you can see in the background though, it's calamity for Giovanni Badiali out of the Varianti Villeneuve on his way to Tosa. That's the end of his qualifying. Lebay remains on pole, Badiali in second. Villorio could definitely do a ways to upset here today, but he brings it into the pits. The gap just too far away, even though it was hovering just under 0.2 of a second between himself and Badiali. So the only driver remaining, so it seems right now, to potentially make a breach into the top 5 is Kevin Quain. But as we see, Byron Forrest also among the drivers to have brought things in at the end of qualifying today. So we want to get on board with the next driver to the line. That'll be Julio Bahena on the exit of the Varianti Alta. At number 18, next down towards Ravazza, and then it'll be the number 39 of Christophe Dupois. The number 22's in trouble, and there goes the number 18. John Prime was also in trouble. That was the 22. So we'll be getting on board with the 39 next. Christophe Dupois with Chevrolet. He also runs into a bit of bother there down at Ravazza, right on his trails at the moment. Appears to be that number 26. That being Fabiano Bartoletti's Aston Martin. Now on the exit of Ravazza, there goes Dupois into the pits. Does Bartoletti follow him? Doesn't appear to be the case, as a matter of fact. Here comes Fabiano Bartoletti to the line. Can it be a breach into the top 10? We discussed the gaps from earlier on. Is it possible? Sadly, not this time around. Next to the line comes Richard Cecil. He brings it into the pits as well. That's the end of what is an otherwise incredibly close story on all fronts for qualifying today. We'll get a full grid breakdown in a moment's time, but really, theory didn't only just take us so far. It took us a good 100% of the way here in qualifying today, as the gaps are still incredibly close. Rather unsurprisingly then, one of the largest gaps on this field still persists between the top 2. Lebay has stolen away that pole position. There was absolutely no chance for fight back by the end of today's quali session. So it's going to be all or nothing on that race start. Now, even though we have 60 minutes and a full pit stop ahead of us here, strategy will be getting in to the nitty-gritty details of who comes out on top. It is not just a sprint. It is still, in and of itself, a bit of a marathon. It is a thinking man's game we'll be thinking of in the long run. But it is going to be one of the more intense starts, is the point I'm getting at. And let's break down the grid then for round 5 of the championship. Christian Lebay on another pole position, an unstoppable performance by the 119 Chevrolet. Giovanni Badiali lines up on the front row in second place. Anthony Villorio right behind Lebay lines up on the second row and alongside Timo De Tosto in the number 58. Kevin Quain, squeezed just outside of the top 5, will start behind Villorio, directly behind, but alongside Byron Forrest in 6th place at the end of that third row. On the 4th row, Richard Cecil and Carl Martel, Clinton Bourne and Alex Albert round out the top 10. Then behind them, John Prine and Fabiano Bartoletti for the 6th row. For the 7th row, Andrew Velkamp and Julio Bahena on debut, Gabriel Gaudreau and Richard Lynch on the 8th row, and then rounding out the top 17, Christophe Dupois in the number 39 Chevy. So this is going to be a bit of a nail-biter, to put it bluntly. We saw the antics between this top 3 back in Donington. Not only did we get to see it once, we got to see it twice in the same evening. Or same morning for us, actually. Would have been evening for the folks at home in the United States and in North America in general. Eastern Standard Time and whatnot. But we got to see those antics play out in parallel with position shifted between Badiali and Villorio. We got to see both scenarios play out. We were only going to get the one opportunity today for the race start. About a minute and a half out then from the race start. Now, one does wonder, thinking back to Donington Park, thinking back to round 4 of the championship in both of those 30-minute races, like we mentioned, we've seen the scenario play out before. We've seen it play out for both eventualities, for Badiali and Valorio. They find themselves rather precariously in the exact same spot as they were last week. With the longer run down towards Tamburello, could things get better or worse for Badiali lining up in second place? On the one hand, you could definitely make the argument he's got clear air in the car. He's going to have much better maneuverability heading down into turn 2 for the first time before he has to tuck in behind the Chevrolet. The question there is he going to be left behind on that drag race? Because that McLaren is basically getting a free slipstream here. It is getting a hole carved through the air by that Chevy. It can sit right behind one of the fastest cars in a straight line in GT4, both the Chevy and the McLaren. So this is a bit of a tough spot here. Badiali may have just become a victim of his own success here, as lining up in second might have actually not been the greatest call. But we've seen Badiali starts before. He is no slouch, and he can make that machine work. So let's see what he can do then. What witchcraft can the 998 bring to the quarters of Imola today? Bear in mind, there's a lot on the table here for Gio Badiali. I mean, you've got to consider perhaps some of the outlying circumstances of today's race. This could be one of the most invigorated performances we see out of Badiali this season, of course, racing on home soil. So he's not going to be going down without a very, very good fight today. This is his best chance all season to try and take home a race win. He's already displayed very clear confidence in both machine and track. He may not have been as fast as LeBay, but he's definitely just as feisty on the race start. He knows what he's doing there. He's been around the block. He's walked the walk and he's talked the talk. This is not his first rodeo here in Imola. So this could be very, very exciting to watch from that front row. Looking further around the field, Byron Forrest on a very solid qualifying against the odds again. Now, I fear for the day that they finally give that Porsche some good balance of performance, because Byron Forrest could absolutely rake in a podium by the end of this season if BOP was just a little bit more favourable for him. Bear in mind, it's been double figures for the last 3 weeks for Porsche. They could not catch a break if they tried. But he has been working some serious witchcraft in that 824 to put it where it is in qualifying. He's lined up with Mercedes engines all around him there. The Aston Martin of Richard Cecil right behind him. The AMG of Kevin Quain right in front of him. He's surrounded on all fronts in a very odd position, as amongst a grid of 10 cars around him. Oh, was he accidentally opened up the replays? That's not what we wanted. We wanted to try and get a look at the overall timing charts, but you know, you can never always have it all. You see the return the carriage button's just completely blanked out. That's awful. So you can see the grid around him. All of those cars in that top 10, except for him, have a V8 engine in some capacity. Now, whether it's the McLaren V8, the Chevrolet V8, or the AMG V8, they're still all working with more cylinders, more displacement, and more torque than the titular 718 Cayman. So he's playing against odds on all fronts here, both from balance of performance and both just from a technical standpoint. Maneuverability seems to be his ace in the hole here. We've seen what those Porsches are capable of here in Imola, and they can be absolutely lethal in the right hands. And I've got very good confidence they are in the right hands today, with Byron Forrest behind the wheel of the only Porsche left on this grid. Looking further around the order, things could be very exciting for Julio Bahena. Now, he starts alongside Fabiano Bartoletti, heading up that... he starts alongside Andrew Veldkamp, who's a little bit behind him at the moment. Have to line up 2 abreast here, but he's not too far away from Bartoletti. Those two looking for a very exciting race here in Imola today. Oh, looking back towards the front then, as we've not many more corners left before the start of today's race. So back into the 60-minute format. This is going to be a good one then, ladies and gents. One mandatory pit stop for fuel and tyres on the charts today then, here in round 5 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, brought to you by Malois Transport and AssurAction Transport Expert, and live exclusively on TRTN. We are but moments away then. So does begin the crawl out of turn 19 down towards the start-finish line here, the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari. Here for round 5 of the championship, we are among the twilight chapters, as it were, for season 1 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Without further ado then, as we line up 17 cars in all, 2 abreast, down towards turn 1. Without further ado then, here in Imola, Taking us away from pole position is Labay. And it's better late than never, but we are green and racing finally here at the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari. A great getaway then by Labay, and we can already see that vacuum be formed as taking up the helm comes Velorio alongside Badiali down towards the Variante Tamburello for the first time here. It's very nearly, yes, it is contact as a matter of fact between the pair of them on the race start. Now, not the worst in the world here. We have seen much worse starts here in Imola, but those two will be seeing absolutely nothing but red over the course of the rest of this race today. But there is a yellow flag out. We can see quite a few cars were caught up in the calamity down the order here. Let's see if we can get a look on board with just some of them. We can see among them Alex Albert and Clinton Bourne, the number 6 and the number 36. Both caught up in that incident from earlier. Vilorio takes up the helm of second. Quain inherits third off of Giovanni Badiali. Richard Cecil now up to 5th, as we can see further problems down the order for Richard Lynch. He drops position out there to Julio Bahena. So right now, Labay from Velorio, Quain, Badiali and Cecil in the top 5. Looking further down the order to see the casualty toll, as it were. You can see Carl Martel now 6th. Byron Forrest having dropped down quite a few positions there, was swallowed up by the tide of V8s around him there. Not the greatest start for the Porsche, but he's got 58 minutes to play against in today's race. We can see further up the order was the attempt of a move there by Badiali on Quain down at the Variante Alta. Now we know it's possible, but on most occasions, more so than not, it is suicide to attempt it. We are seeing here the potential brewings of a fight for the top 5. Now up ahead, we can see that fight for 3rd. We will be checking in with those guys in a moment's time here. Let's see if we can get on board here with Kevin Quain being pressured at the moment for 3rd place by Giovanni Badiali, who has not had the greatest of starts. Now that was that little prang between himself and Anthony Velorio up ahead in that McLaren down at the Variante Tamburello. Turns 2, 3 and 4 on this track. After that first lap, Labay has charged away with the lead. They're confident, up nearly 3 seconds to the rest of the field on his way to Tamburello. So let's get a look back in that fight for 5th. Martel v Cecil. Richard Cecil has had a very good start then with Aston Martin. Let's stay on board with these two as they go heading down towards the Variante Villeneuve up the road. You can see Badiali v Quain. We'll be keeping an ear to the ground on that one, and we'll update you as and when we can. We're on board with Richard Cecil then in the fight for 5th. Bear in mind, he can see up the order there, side by side by the looks of things, between Badiali and Quain. Now, that's in that fight for 3rd up the road. Right now, he's got to deal with this in the fight for 5th. That's Carl Martel. They're not too far away. Byron Forrest and Timo de Tosto getting into arms for position. So let's actually catch on board with those two, as things could be getting very spicy indeed. These are two very confident American talents on this grid today. The 58 and the 824 down towards Piratella at turn 9. So just briefly on board here, that thunderous noise, that 4-litre AMG twin-turbo, as he very nearly gets up on the rear quarter of the 824. He has put him in a very good position here, as he'll be up the inside as we mount the crest here on the way to the Variante Alta. Now, does does Forrest yield? Martel is up the road and chasing Richard Cecil, but a very tidy move in there from Timo de Tosto. That very nearly came at quite grave costs to the pair of them. It was so close to contact down at the Acqua Minerale. But Giovanni Badiali, there is nothing but absolutely white-hot boiling metal in his bloods at the moment. That 998 is just seeing red with the 41 up the road in the position he got on quali. He was shunted out through the chicane. He is not going to be feeling the best of things in those opening 10 minutes of the race. Hopefully he's able to simmer things down and bring this back into strategy, knowing everyone has got to take at least one pit stop today as per the regulations. That'll be coming in at the bulk of things in the midway mark, around that 30 minutes. Now, we give or take about 15 either side of it, as we've seen the logical extremes on both sides for a strategy playing point. We've seen drivers go for a very early pit stop and undercut the rest of the field. We've seen drivers go for a very late one and attempt an overcut. We've seen it work and we've seen it fail. That's the great thing about this otherwise very simple formula. We see in the background De Tosto running all manner of wide out of the Variante Villeneuve. We're on board though with Giovanni Badiali in that fight for 3rd place. Now, this is as close as it's been for a good while between these two, heading in towards the middle sector down at Piratella. We're watching with Badiali as he chases Kevin Quain. Meanwhile, Anthony Velorio just continues to escape up the road, now nearly 2 seconds from the pair of them on their way down to Acqua Minerale. We've seen Badiali finally get the leg up here on the 607, but as they make their way to the Variante Alta, he'll be to the outside. So the question therein remains, what does he have in store for us down at the Variante Alta, defending then the line? Here's the 607, gets the better of the two exits, so maybe down at Ravazza where he next has his chance to have a look for the inside. Finds himself 3 attempts. He's closing in. You can see already suggesting a hole to the left-hand side of the track, then goes back onto the racing line. We are starting to see the sort of inklings of a defensive performance out of Kevin Quain at the moment for that fight of third place. Behind them, Richard Cecil is closing ground to the pair. So Richard Cecil could yet fight for a podium. He started the season off with Alpine. That move to Aston Martin was a gamble worth taking because he's had so much of a better performance over the course of the season, moving into a car with an engine more than twice the size of his last. Down towards Variante Tamburello. This is where Badiali's able to make up the bulk of his time. That first sector he has got absolutely locked in. The 998 unstoppable there. But Quain knows a thing or two when it comes to defending. What will he be able to do here at Tosa? He's just had a worse than ideal exit on the exit of Villeneuve. So up the inside at Tosa comes Badiali. Now, this is what I'm talking about here. As we exit Tosa, we then begin the climb uphill. So it's not so easy to secure a move past the apex there, as you do invite the other driver to come and have a go down at Piratella. That's exactly what we're seeing here, but backing out goes the 607. In his mind, he definitely could have tried to lunge for it, but both of them would have been seeing the far right of the track by the time they exit turn 10. That would have only been to Richard Cecil's gain, who I must say now is actively a part of this fight for third place, as he is very, very close to the back of Kevin Quain as we speak. Now on the exit of Aqua Minerale, you can see the gap start to form between Valorio and Badiali. Let's see whether or not that gap continues to drop. That fight for third has feasibly died in the water, as now Kevin Quain has to eye up his chances to defend fourth from a very rapidly approaching Richard Cecil. Looking around the field here, Byron Forrest having lost out ground to Timo de Tosto. Now, we did see de Tosto leading that pack not long ago when he went wide out through the Variante Villeneuve, as a matter of fact. That was in the move earlier on we saw between the two Mercedes cars, that being Badiali and Quain, fighting for third on track. So for Forrest here, those V8s have really got him pinned down, and now in qualifying performance it's not so much a problem because the Porsche is much more nimble, and in the rest of the track it knows it can have them. But with this area of the track so heavily biased towards the Chevys, the Mercedeses, and the McLarens of this grid, and the Astons for that matter as well, he is finding it very hard to beat the obvious reality. He's not brought enough cylinders here to this race, so it seems. That Porsche, a grand little machine, but as the adage goes, there's no replacement for displacement. We'll see what he can do, because that gap hasn't exactly disappeared away from him. It's still hovering just above a second, and it seems to be in equal arms of the gap as it stood out through Tosa between himself and the car behind, John Prine, in pursuit there from 9th position. Looking around the field, because Julio Bahaina's up a few positions from the race start, so he's been able to surf some of the madness that happened down at Tamburello, even namely from one of the drivers right behind him. The number 6 of Clinton Bourne has not had an ideal start to today's race, caught up in the mix of it down on the exit of Tamburello. Looking around that field though to see where our next drivers could be fighting. LeBay certainly won't be, because in just under 5 laps he's pulled nearly 4.5 seconds. We can actually see though a little bit of sideways action, or side-by-side action I should say, between Kevin Quain and Richard Cecil. Let's see what Cecil can do here. This is all in that fight for 4th position. Cecil's going for it up the inside of Ravazza. It's all gone incredibly wrong for him there. Running wide out of Ravazza. Surely that's a position back in the charts for Quain. No, it isn't, because here comes Carl Martel up to 4th. That has been an absolute rotter for Richard Cecil. He had the idea, he had the vision, and he did go for it. And right now he could actually be losing out 7th to Byron Forrest. There goes the Porsche. It's been stuck in the train of slipstreams for so long. But you can see even past the second part of this straight, or this straight, big quotation marks, the Aston is already clawing back time. Down into the Variante Tamburello then, Richard Cecil drops from the fight of 4th to the fight of 7th. And it's all gone rather pear-shaped for him. who hasn't gone pear-shaped so far for Aston Martin is that of Fabiano Bartolletti. He's right now back into the top 10. Last time he saw a top 10 was the second part of round 4, the second race at Donington, where in which he finished 9th. Right now, he could be losing out that top 10 because he's got a massively reinvigorated performance from the 616 of Andrew Veldkamp on his tail at the moment, not too far away, as well as Gabriel Gaudreau, side by side there up through Tosa. That was a surprise move there by Veldkamp. He has done well to hold it. Didn't appear to be any contact, but he got very, very close to it. There, climbing up the hill, the 26, just a little bit more oomph in the Aston Martin on its way down to Piratella. Great stuff then by these two in the fight for the last of those top 10 positions. It's still yet to dissipate though, because having a much better line out through turns 9 and 10 at Piratella was Andrew Veldkamp. How does he lock everything up on his way through the Aqua Minerale? As at the inside is still Fabiano Bartolletti. He's got rights to the racing line here. How well can he use them with a tide of Mercedes cars chasing him down towards the Variante Alta? Let's see as we head down into Variante Alta. Playing things safe there. He's not looking to tackle any curbs, not looking to upset any track limits. He's playing things nice and cool in the opening 15 minutes. He knows there's quite a lot of race still left to play for. Down towards Ravazza. He's hoping the Mercedes cars get a little too enthusiastic and maybe burn themselves out, but that does not come without its risk, especially down at Ravazza, as we saw earlier on from Richard Cecil, the other Aston Martin in this race. That can come with great risk to oneself. And this time around, he'd be on the receiving end. Looking around the field, we are actually seeing what appears to be a little scrap here. Now, this is between Byron Forrest and Richard Cecil. Now, when we picked up with them earlier, it was the fact that Cecil had dropped back a few positions after a move that ultimately didn't go his way down at Ravazza. Now he looks to be picking up the pieces and is back on the revenge drive here, just under 15 minutes into today's race, and already things have kicked back off. The Aston Martin almost eclipsing there the titular Porsche on its way down to turn 7. Up the road as well, Martel and Quain definitely getting into arms for it there. They're separated by about 0.4 of a second. It could be a three-way fight there, with De Tosto creeping in a frame on the 607 and the 99. Meanwhile, Byron Forrest has his hands full in the fight for 7th. So looking just under a quarter of an hour into this race, Christian Lebay leads with the fastest lap by a whopping 5-second split to Anthony Valorio. Giovanni Battiali is closing the gap on his former front row rival back in Donington. Those two ended up clashing down at Tamburello. There is ice in the, well, formerly melting hot blood there, but now ice in the blood of Giovanni Battiali. He has massively tempered his aggression here, is channeling all of that into his drive back to second. Karl Martel ends up inheriting 4th after that incident earlier on between between Cecil and Quain. Quain in 5th, De Tosto in 6th, very close behind as well. Byron Forrest, we saw earlier on, still battling with Richard Cecil. John Prine in 9th, and Fabiano Bartolletti has cleared the margin away from Veldkamp, now has a bit more of a confident lead of the fight of 10th place. Veldkamp now having a deal more so with his fellow Mercedes. They're the number 3 of Gabriel Gaudreau in 12th. Julio Bahena not too far away either on his first race here in the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Down in 14th then is Clinton Bourne, Richard Lynch in 15th, Christophe Dupois in 16th, Alex Albert in 17th, already having taken his pit stop after significant damages then on that opening lap incident. Back on board with Forrest and Cecil down through Tamburello. You can see much better of the line of the two there from the 824. He's getting a lot more confident with that car. We saw a little spat here and there, and that was ultimately what was losing him out some of those positions, not only in quali but also in the race as well. But he's learning very quickly the do's and don'ts of the Porsche 718 Cayman on a track like Imola. It is a track designed to break. So looking around the field again, let's see where our fights are coming from. Now we can see Albert and Lynch close to each other, but on separate lengths of the race. We can also see, looking around here, we were previously seeing the suggestion of a fight here for 4th, and there it is between Martel and Quain. De Tosto, having dropped back quite a way there, could almost find himself in and amongst the fight behind between Forrest and Cecil. It's half a second right now between the Chevy and the Mercedes down towards the Variante Alta. Nothing to report as of yet there on the exit of Variante Alta. Better of the two exits by the 99. Letting the hammer drop there on that 6.2 litre. Rockets away from the Mercedes. On with Richard Cecil. Now the second part of this fight here for 7th place. We've been watching a lot with Byron Forrest. Now we get to see the attacking point of view from the Aston Martin. We do want to get a look here just towards that back of the top 10. Things are closing up here in the fight between Prine and Bartoletti. Moreover, the fight between Bartoletti and Veldkamp and Gaudreau, for that matter, as well. Seeing here from the point of view of Gabriel Gaudreau, he's right on the tail of Andrew Veldkamp. The two Mercedes cars fighting just outside of the top 10. Both of them gunning to be next in line to hunt down that canary yellow Aston Martin Vantage. That currently being driven in the numbers of the 20s. The numbers of the 26 there of Fabiano Bartoletti. So back on with Richard Cecil. It's looking incredibly close down to the Variante Villeneuve. Too close for comfort, perhaps. He does go for it alongside, then tucks back in behind. Has got the more aggressive of two exits to line himself up for perhaps around the outside move at Tosa. He's gone much later on the brakes to try and compensate for it, but ultimately all he's been done is denied the racing line there by the 824. Has ultimately the worst of two exits, doing the best that he can with the uncertain odds at play here. Richard Cecil still clawing away to try and get up to 7th. Now looking around the field at what's going on further up the order, we can see Markle v Quain kicking off. Right behind him there, Timo de Tosto as well. Will stay on board, though, in this fight for 4th place. On board with the defending of the two cars, Karl Markle. Now, any previous suggestions we've made over the course of the season that because both of these drivers are with the Malois racing team, that maybe they'd taper their aggression to one another on track has been all but quelled over the course of Donington last week. We know that they may share a tag, but they do not share an obligation to treat each other nicely on the track. If they want to fight for position, it's no holds barred here amongst the MRT team. When it comes to a team effort, absolute professionals, but when you let them spar amongst themselves, they brawl like Vikings. The 99 then, 0.6 of a second ahead of the 607. Timo de Tosto closing the gap. We'll catch up with these three later on. Checking back in on Cecil v Forest, that's opened up as well. You can see in the last lap, it was a whopping 3/10. Actually, yes, actually, as a matter of fact, 0.3 of a second faster for Byron Forrest in the last lap gone. So he's really been able to pick up the pace in that Porsche. Finally found the magic ratio, as it were, for the 824 over the course of this race. In the background, Bartoletti is right on top of John Prime for but a moment there out through Tamburello. Behind them as well, Veldkamp and Gaudreau now side by side. The two Mercedes cars could be getting into arms here for a move down towards the Variante Villeneuve. Up the inside, then goes Gaudreau, holds his position, then through it into 11th, I should say, out through Villeneuve, goes massively wide onto the gravel. That could invite Veldkamp back in. He's going to go the long way around at turn 7. The 616 is going to have quite the rise up the hill here on the number 3. Who comes out on top then in that fight for 11th? Fabiano Bartoletti has disappeared up the road from these two at the moment. Now has his eyes set on 9th place, currently coveted by the 22 of John Prime. We're watching with Gabriel Gaudreau. I believe there to be trouble as no, my eyes do not deceive me. Bartoletti is up and ahead of Prime. Something did go wrong for the number 22, because he still held that lead, but he's dropped time massively over 9 and 10. See in the background, Veldkamp now under siege by Julio Behane and the McLaren, eyeing up a move to the inside. We look over the rear view as he very nearly commits to it. On the exit of the Variante Alta, both of them slowing down massively, caught in each other's wake there to try and defend and attack for the same position. Veldkamp now has Behane for company as up the road goes Gabriel Gaudreau. We're on board with Andrew Veldkamp. Here comes Julio Behane looking for the inside in the McLaren down at Ravazza. This can be a real tricky zone, and it's contact between the pair of them. Very minor, but not very happy for Andrew Veldkamp. He's not going to be particularly cheerful with that one. Looking up the road then, Quain v Martle still in arms here. Now we're on board with the attacking of two perspectives, getting on board with Kevin Quain. Still fighting for that 4th place. Timo de Tosto is incredibly close behind. You can see in the background there, the 824 fighting with the number 5. Byron Forrest versus Richard Cecil still in play here. We can quickly pan across to see that whenever we want to. So if something does happen, and I believe we're not far from seeing something happen there, we'll be right there and ready. Right now, though, it's Quain v Martle. This is where I'm starting to notice as well, even if Martel isn't giving it like 110% through that area of the track, he knows he can taper a lot of the momentum off of those Mercedes cars because they struggle for the acceleration uphill compared to the Chevrolet. Just the way those cars have been put together, the Chevy's just got so much more grunt down low. It's got to compensate for a lack of having any kind of forced induction technology whatsoever. Of course, looking into the story of that GT4R, because it bears striking resemblance to the Camaro ZL1, it can't actually use the same engine because superchargers are banned under SRO regulations. More on that story in a moment, though, because it looks to be side by side out through turn 19. It filters back in to single file here as we start to see the gap perhaps rise or shut between these two, caught right in the slipstream. If he pokes out for even a moment, the Chevy might be able to bounce back, but here comes Kevin Quain up the inside on Karl Martel, down through the Variante Tamburello, runs things deep for turn 2, then at turn 3, he's up and ahead. By turn 4, he's nailed it. Now we can see, having dropped into the jaws here of another Mercedes car, Timo de Tosto is now right up to the back end of Karl Martel's Chevrolet. Meanwhile, in the background, the 824 has pulled ahead, but off and wide goes Kevin Quain, so he forfeits that position off from Karl Martel. Can Timo de Tosto capitalise on the mistakes there of the 607 on the exit of Tosa as we run uphill? This could very likely be the case here. That Mercedes is eyeing him up, so we are out of that fight for fourth. We are more realistically looking at a defensive fight for fifth place. Kevin Quain is without a line here to try and claw his way back to fourth. He needs something to happen for Karl Martel, and right now he seems to be the slipperiest of the three. Down to the Aqua Minerale section then. Great exit by the 607. He's been able to surf the Chevrolet slipstream to keep himself out of harm's way of Timo de Tosto. But as we know with de Tosto, he is willing to take quite a gamble when it comes to a good move. We know what he's capable of there in that Mercedes. Nothing to be trifled with. A three-man fight right now. We are looking back into that fight for fourth. It was briefly fifth for Kevin Quain to fend off the position he holds on track, but now both of them have recuperated the losses there of momentum out through sector 1 and are back on the charge then for the Chevrolet. Now, this is where Karl Martel could still yet hold advantage. As mentioned before, if either of the two Mercedes cars duck out of the slipstream too early, they could find themselves in imminent trouble. Just quickly checking their Veldkamp now right alongside, by the looks of it, Julio Bahena. Well, just checking both sides of that there, but we're back on board with Quain. So he's had to stay all the way in the slipstream over the course of this entire straightaway section of the track. Couldn't find any ground to gain on the Chevrolet. So back onto that story. The way that car's been geared up, it's got so much power down low, it has to compensate for its lack of any kind of forced induction system. Of course, it looks like a ZL1, but it doesn't use the LT4 engine. He uses the LT1 from the Camaro SS. Up the inside, then goes Kevin Quain. He may just have the leap here on the 99 on the way out of Tosa. Bear in mind, still on the racing line is the 99. And there you can see exactly the LT1 in practice. That 6.2 litre naturally aspirated V8 doing God's work to keep him in that fight alongside the Mercedes cars there with their twin turbo 4 litre. But he's had an absolute rotter of a line through turns 9 and 10. That invites Timo de Tosto to swing to swing around there, sweep the leg, as it were, on the Chevy. Now having dropped down as sixth, Kevin Quain maintains fourth. Timo de Tosto in fifth. Karl Martel drops 2 positions for the price of 1. Down to the Variante Alta. We'll catch up with those drivers later on. We want to check in with the fight going on right behind us. Two worlds collide here, getting closer and closer to being in that fight for fourth themselves is Byron Forrest and Richard Cecil. Forrest in 7th, Cecil 8th. Right now, they find themselves teetering on the fight for fourth. Up ahead, you can see the Mercedes cars now taking the helm of that fight for fourth. Quain from de Tosto from Martel. Into the pits, though, goes Byron Forrest. Then early pit strategy for the 824. Looking further down the line at the same area of the track, we caught them last lap as Julio Bahena and Andrew Veldkamp massively underpinning the brakes. There was the 616, and off the track he goes. Getting a look at that on the replay, that you can see where that's kicked off for the 616. By the looks of it as well, we saw a little bit of rotation under the brakes. So did he catch a bit of grass as he got onto the brakes there. No, he just kept it right, and then that's when he caught the grass and lost all the traction on the car. So it was an aversion tactic to keep himself from colliding with Bahena. So fair play there to Andrew Veldkamp, but it has cost him position to Clinton Bourne's number 6. We can see trouble here. Badiali up alongside Velorio is now up and ahead, returning the favour for the action down at Tambirello, now into Aqua Minerale. These two are side by side. Now, who pulls the trigger first on that pit lane run? We've already seen Byron Forrest take a stab at it. We've caught them right in the heat of a fight here for second place, returning the favour, as it were, for what happened down at the race start. Down into the Variante Alta we go. Velorio from Badiali, and as we saw in qualifying, it was going to catch someone, and it unfortunately has caught Velorio by the ankle once more. The 41 in serious trouble on his way now down towards Ravazza. He's been able to lick the stamp and send it there, but has that been a little too deep on the brakes? Yes, it has. Through goes Badiali. Velorio down to 3rd. That has been catastrophic, and not the first time we've seen a driver run wide into Ravazza. Into the pits then goes Anthony Velorio. More recent news then coming across for the number 5. Richard Cecil gets a drive-through penalty for track limits conduct. So that is catastrophic for the number 5 at the moment. Up the road, we can see Kevin Quain, Timo de Tosto and Carl Martel incredibly close still in what has now become the fight for 3rd. Velorio into the pits, Cecil in the pits as well for the drive-through penalty. So for Kevin Quain here, world's weight on his shoulders as it was back in qualifying. Now effectively fending off 3rd on track. That could be provisionally 4th or 5th later on when strategy plays its hand. Also into the pits as well, Fabiano Bartoletti. As it's all gone horribly wrong, and he's nicked there around the back end. That was Timo de Tosto that he just clapped there on the back. That could have gotten very, very rough for the pair of them. So let's just try and get a look there. He definitely did hit him. On my screen, he definitely did hit him. Clipped him there. So there, up over the curb, and yeah, there was a hit. Then there was definitely also a hit there as well for Carl Martel. That has gone horribly wrong. So De Tosto was it now taking up 4th. Prine taking up 5th, as now down in 6th there. Not Prine, sorry. Martel taking up 4th as Quain takes up 5th. Prine, he's in a world of his own here. He's got Gabriel Gaudreau for company, as a matter of fact. Completely opposite end of the track. That's not gone well for Kevin Quain. That's one domino effect there. Clipped around the pair of drivers he's been clashing with over the course of this race. De Tosto and Martel. So actually looking into this here as we just catch Gabriel Gaudreau side by side with John Prine. So what can the number 3 do here? He's up against the 6.2. What can he do on his way to Ravazza? He's held his nerve there. The number 3 goes down into turns 16 and 17, turns 17 and 18 now actually. As a matter of fact, into the pits goes Timo de Tosto and Kevin Quain, both the Mercedes cars into the pit lane. Does Gaudreau join him? No, but he fools Prine into doing so. Sold him a dummy there as to whether or not that was actually Prine's intention to do so, if he was just going to follow Gaudreau. Gaudreau stays out, inherits 4th. So we can see the bulk of those pit lane runs coming in now in full force. Leading the charge still as we hit the 31-minute mark in today's race. Christian Lebay leads that charge. Badiali now 2nd, Martel 3rd, Gaudreau 4th, De Tosto in the pit lane at the moment. That puts Clinton Bourne up to 5th. Veldkamp not too far away as well. That puts him in 6th place. Now we'll get a full refresh of that grid later on once we see all of the pit stops complete. We can see Anthony Velorio taking quite a few positions under his belt there after a very... it wasn't necessarily that early. It was an emergency undercut there. As you saw, his tyres were properly cooked out, having to fight alongside the Mercedes of Giovanni Badiali. Now up and ahead of Tosto, Forrest and Quain. You can see that scramble to get out of the pit lanes as well. Coming into the pits then comes Christophe Dupois. You can see in front of him there Giovanni Badiali's Mercedes. There's Fabiano Bartoletti already having taken his pit stop, so that's payday at the moment. Christian Lebay into the pits. So he won't be taking home a Grand Slam. He's not led every single lap here. On to lap 15. He's second as he's coming into the pits before Badiali. Richard Cecil on his way out. There's Bartoletti now up to what is 12th on track. Could be more positions on the horizon for him here as we hit the halfway mark of the race. So among the drivers in the pits as well, Martel, Dupois, Lebay, a whole swarm of Chevrolet cars on their way into the pits. See, here's Byron Forrest. Now provisionally 8th. Again, more on the rise for positions. Julio Bahena leaves the pit lane in 14th place. As mentioned as well, still an opportunity for more positions here by the end of today's race. You can see one such fight to have emerged almost immediately out of the pit lane. Prine v Bartoletti. This could be an interesting one. We saw this much earlier on in the race today. Now, as they make their way into the second part of today's 60-minute race, they find themselves once again united on track. Looking at where things stand at the moment, still a lot to process. Gaudreau and Bourne into the pits. Martel on his way out of the pits. All of them subject a big change there for position. Badiali still leads that charge. Actually, I'm curious here to see what is the thought process for Badiali. He's had to fight quite a lot harder than some of the other drivers inside that top 3 to get back to where he is, and now makes his way into the pits after leading I think about 2 laps of today's race. Andrew Veldkamp in second, all the way down at Piratella. Actually, right behind him, physically on track, is Christian Lebay. So let's get on board with this. This could get very, very interesting here. Andrew Veldkamp, 1.2 seconds up the road. We're on board with Lebay on his way back to leading this race. Bear in mind, the race leader, Giovanni Badiali, is in the pit lane right now, whilst Lebay is down at the Variante Alta. Now, we have noticed before and continue to notice continued struggles for Lebay in the pit lane. Now, this could be something as simple as missing the pit box, but that can cost up to 4 to 6 seconds at minimum for one's pit stop time, just to correct one very slight altercation. Could this be a case here? Because the gap was definitely a lot further than we were expecting it to be, that Lebay ran into some kind of troubles here, or has it just fallen into his hands perfectly? As we can see, still yet to have finally made his way out of the pit lane. Badiali drops off the jacks, but it's too little too late, because here comes Christian Lebay back to what it seemingly is the race lead, whilst Badiali is rolling down pit road. He's down a second. Now, I want to see where does he stack up here on the exit as we wait to see where does he fan out amongst himself and Valorio. Valorio just crosses the timing line. The 41 is moving with great speed upon him. The 41 there, you can see crossing into the foreground, just blurred out from the cameras, down into Tamburello. That is an extreme difference in pace there. Just making his way out, tiptoeing on a brand new Pirellis versus Anthony Valorio, who is rocketing out through turns 2, 3, and 4. Veldkamp in the pits as well, the 616, our final pit stop of today here in round 5. This could get spicy. We saw how they clashed the last time around. We saw how they clashed on the race start. There is still a story left to tell here of Badiali v Valorio here in Imola. We'll catch up with those two in a moment's time. Byron Forrest is up to 4th. So looking at his track record right now, this is set to be his joint best result this season. Of course, he picked up on that in Laguna Seca. He picked up on it in one of 2 races he competed at the Alton Park double sprint for round 2. So, again, about to equalize on the mark here. Looking back, or looking, I suppose, ahead to what is going on in front of him, that fight for second. If these two spill over one another, and the chances of that happening are still quite high, depending on how bad it gets, it could be a potential podium for Byron Forrest. He's 3 seconds up the road from Timo de Tosto in 5th place. So there is still great opportunities here in and amongst the top 5. Lebay, though, is out by 2 figures ahead of anyone on track here. So for Badiali, he's just going to have to focus on holding on to second. The chances of first place are slipping away with every single corner. You can see in a straight line that McLaren is an absolute bullet. We know two of the best cars for straight line speed down in GT4, the McLaren and the Chevrolet. One for the engine, the other for the body. It just carves its way through the air, that McLaren. It has been incredibly well made. Out through Villeneuve. A little twitchy, though. It seems to be a very common problem with the McLarens, GT3 and GT4. Despite their impressive straight line speed, despite their great maneuverability, it does come at the caveat that the car is a little bit twitchier by nature. That owes to its mid-engine platform. Similar story for that 718 came, and we see it wielded to great effect by Byron Forrest over the course of today's race. And it is an incredibly maneuverable car. It's rear-engined, and that still does come at the cost. It is very unstable. But if you can master that, if you can get around that difficulty curve, I should say, it flows like mercury around most of these tracks. And with a very healthy dosage of FIA Grade 1 today, it has worked an absolute treat for a lot of drivers today. You can see up the road, Lynch and Albert in a very close fight for 15th. Now, they could find themselves inadvertently clashing with the fight for second right now, as Anthony Valorio drops it to within half a second of Giovanni Bardiali's Mercedes, down towards Ravazza at turns 17 and 18. Two Chevys side by side as they are now met by the fight of the last of those podium positions. Here comes Bardiali and Valorio as they make their way into battling traffic. First the 63, then the 36. So the 63 holds it to the left-hand side of the track, and oh my word, he slams the anchors down there. How close did Bardiali want to make it? It's going to get even closer now in the fight for second place as we head into the Variante Tamburello, around the outside for the first part, then to the inside, but a massive jump over those sausage curbs upsets the balance on Valorio's McLaren. It sets him back 7/10 to the Mercedes in second. So looking at where things stand after all of those pit stops, we're still watching with that fight between Bardiali and Valorio. We stay on board at the moment with Bardiali in the fight for second place on this track. Still leading the charge with the fastest lap is Christian Lepay. Then we see second and third, Bardiali and Valorio. Then Byron Forrest in fourth. Timo de Tosto in fifth. We check back in with these two. In sixth, then Carl Martel, Kevin Quain in seventh, John Prine in eighth, Fabiano Bartoletti in ninth, Gabriel Gaudreau in 10th. Clinton Bourne is right behind Gaudreau at this time in the fight for 10th. You can see those two very, very close to one another. Actually, that could boil over in a moment's time. We're going to sort of draw parallels here between one another. Valorio has dropped behind quite a ways here through Minerali. Bourne failing to find a gap there down to Tamburello. Gaudreau continues to lead that charge from 10th. Richard Cecil in 12th. Andrew Velkamp in 13th. Julio Bahena 14th. Alex Albert 15th. Richard Lynch in 16th. Christophe Dupois in 17th. You can see again, I just want to bring this back up to the attention of the viewers. Bourne v Gaudreau, definitely one fight to keep in the back pocket today, because they are fighting for the last of those top 10 positions on the chart right now. Right in front of them, you can see one of the Chevy cars there. Trying to gauge exactly who that is. That's Christophe Dupois, number 39. Back on with Clinton Bourne. Very nearly made contact there with the number 3 of Gaudreau on his way down through Piratella. Turn 9, now turn 10. Checking back in with Valorio v Bardiali as he started to reel the gap back in. Had a little bit of an upset through the last couple of corners today. And especially over that last lap. Namely, started down here where he went very, very deep over the sausage curbs at this second part of Tamburello. Very nearly caused a flat spin for that car. That could have been the end of his race. We talk about it every now and again of a car suiting the driver, and you can see it with Valorio. He's quite an intense driver, so that machine really does tend to suit him. That McLaren is all manner of twitchy, but able to flow perfectly around the track when in the right kind of conditions. Now, admittedly, under pressure, it's not been its greatest today, but Valorio can't really scoff at the fact that he's finishing net neutral if he stays where he is right now. Quickly just back on board with Bourne v Gaudreau as one of the other closest fights on the track today. Chevrolet versus the Mercedes. Behind them, you can see Richard Cecil trying to make his way around lap traffic. Down into the Variante Villeneuve, Gabriel Gaudreau in the number 3. We'll stay on board with these two for a moment here, as this is developing into being a very, very interesting fight on the charts today for the last of those top 10 positions. Clinton Bourne there in the bright green number 6. We're following with Gabriel Gaudreau in the stealth black number 3 Mercedes. Out through Tosa then. Up through turn 8, now to turn 9 at Piratella. Then through turn 10, now to turns 11, 12 and 13, the Aqua Minerale section. How does Gaudreau manage then with Clinton Bourne breathing down his neck? Up the road there, you can see Fabiano Bartoletti, who, if he finishes where he stands at the moment, then the next 19.5 minutes will equalise on his best result and is going to continue the story of upwards momentum there. Oh, that's trouble for Bourne, though. It's a half spin for the number 6. That will drop him into the sights of Richard Cecil. And Gabriel Gaudreau picks up a drive-through penalty. So that has gone incredibly wrong. In the same vein that struck Richard Cecil's performance in this race has now hit Gaudreau. And up the inside goes Richard Cecil, capitalising on some of the fog of war going on in this fight for the back of the top 10. Gets up past Clinton Bourne. Now with Gaudreau taking leave there of stage right onto the pit lane. The pit road, I should say, for a drive-through penalty. Now Richard Cecil has perhaps bit off more than he expected to chew, because he has now definitely upset there Clinton Bourne in the Chevrolet. He has now just got in the bad books of one of the only other cars on track capable of overtaking him in a straight line. Down towards turns 2, 3 and 4, though, Clinton Bourne did not have enough momentum, so I am genuinely stumped there. The Chevrolets have been absolute demons through that straightaway section. This is the one time they've been shown up. Quickly checking back in here, Valorio v Badiali. They are still very close to one another here. You're hovering in and around the second to sub-second margin for the fight of second place. Back in with Bourne v Cecil. And it's only gone from bad to worse for Gabriel Gaudreau, because it started as a drive-through penalty. He's oversped, I should say, into the pit lane. So that is a stop-go 30-second penalty. That has gone horribly wrong. Quickly checking in with these two, because this is definitely a fight worth watching. Badiali v Valorio. They're on the exit of Tamburello, just double checking now with Bourne v Cecil. That gap on the last checkpoint was still under a second. They make their way to the Variante Alta. Let's check in around the field. We see there's Badiali v Valorio. Forest maintains 4th. Has actually opened the taps up to Timo de Tosto. Now, the last data interval we were checking, it was still in and around 2 seconds. As we just caught on board with him now, that was north of 3. So he's done very well there, all things considered. Julio Bahena is now up a free position, much to the chagrin of Gabriel Gaudreau. So on his first time race here, scrapes closer and closer to a top 10 appearance. I don't see it impossible for Bahena to make a top 10 appearance by the end of the season. We've seen developing stories all throughout the grid. One such example, probably the best example among them so far, Fabiano Bartoletti in that 26 late entry with Aston Martin, still managed to take home a top 10. Looking at his chances for a second in a row of top 10 appearances. Not if these two have anything to say about it, because they're clashing with one another, but they are still closing the time to Bartoletti's Aston Martin. Just checking around the field here. Labay still leads by a country mile. 15 seconds to Giovanni Badiali. And the Mercedes behind him. That gap right now for Fabiano Bartoletti, as he maintains 9th, is actually starting to wither in front of him. So John Prine running into some kind of troubles in the 22. Now, we saw them get very close to one another earlier on in today's race, but this could be the indications that the Aston Martin may have the Chevrolet pitched for tyre conservation in these hotter conditions here in Imola. Now, it's not anywhere near the extremes we've seen in the last 2 weeks of broadcasting here. I still think nothing's topping Monza in a hurry. But something is clearly awry with the 22, because he's shed 0.3 of a second in 2 corners. There's noticeable signs of perhaps engine damage or slowdown on John Price. Something is inhibiting the Chevy from giving it 100%. Not that I'm going to see Fabiano Bartoletti complaining, considering that looks like a free position on the horizon. We'll have to sort of report on it as it happens. There can never be too certain of these things. It could just be a hiccup for the 22. Now on the exit of Ravazza, you can see two battles for the price of one here. Richard Cecil versus Clinton Bourne, that's for 10th. Then up the road, we could be having John Prine versus Fabiano Bartoletti for 8th. Meanwhile, in the pits, Gabriel Gaudreau serving his stop-go 30-second penalty. He's on his way out, and now finally all things cleared. And now joins into the sights here. Their fight for 10th place very nearly found himself directly in harm's way. Clinton Bourne rocketing to the back end of Richard Cecil, but has dropped some time. So now actually the closer of the two fights here, in and around the top 10, is Bartoletti v Prine. This could be a very interesting one here for the last 14.5 minutes of today's race. We'll stay with these two as we once again, into the final quarter hour of racing today, recount the overall standings. Oh, not the overall standings, the race standings. Championship standings are what the overall standings are technically. So, LeBay leads the charge here in round 5. Badiali 2nd, Valorio 3rd, Forrest 4th, Ditosto in 5th, Martel 6th, Quain 7th, Prine 8th, and Bartoletti in 9th, Cecil 10th, Bourne 11th, Veldkamp 12th, Bahena 13th, Albert 14th, Lynch 15th, Gaudreau 16th, and Dupois 17th. 14 minutes left to go then, feasibly about 7 more laps before the checkered flag. Could be potentially getting lucky and maybe suggest 8 or maybe 9 more laps before that checkered flag, but the chances are slim. See, the gap now between Cecil and Bourne has all but dissipated. Now the topic resides on the Aston Martin in front of Richard Cecil, and the one on the centre of your screen right now as we stay on board down through Ravazza with Fabiano Bartoletti. Finds himself stuck between worlds here, too close to back away from Prine, too far away to start defending from Cecil. Looking on that last lap as well, he was 7 tenths slower, I think it was there. Actually more so than that compared to Cecil. So that Aston Martin behind him is catching at a rate of knots here. There could yet still be a civil war amongst the Aston Martins of Bartoletti and Cecil. Something I want to discuss from earlier on in today. Now, this was taking a look at the data for the new drivers. Of course, we've seen Julio Bahena throughout today's race and throughout qualifying and throughout free practice as one of the new drivers of today. But we've yet to see Caleb Kelly and we've yet to see Hayden Prodger. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because Hayden Prodger, more prominently, has had great success now in GT4 down in the classes, the NLRL Solo Multi-Class Endurance Championship, in which he's gotten race wins with Porsche and now Aston Martin. This could be a very exciting time then for Prodger into the near future. Actually, I have to double check the Aston Martin claim. I know that he has moved to Aston Martin. It has been a very, very solid time for him. Let me just double check something real quick because I want to make sure I'm not just going stir crazy after everything that we've been covering here. No, I was correct. He did take a win with Aston Martin. I was right the first time. So the moment he joins the grid here amongst these two, the two more prominent Astons in Competizione Performance League, Bartoletti and Cecil, this could get very spicy. Right? There are drivers now emerging from outside of Competizione Performance League's sphere of influence. And it is going to be a rather spicy next couple of rounds if we are to see them. Right now, though, we are still on board with Fabiano Bartoletti as he considers his odds for the fight of 9th, as he's going to be forced into a defensive one. Prine escapes from view nearly 2 seconds up the road. Richard Cecil now takes it upon himself to enter the fray for 9th position. It's Aston versus Aston, but running out wide, there goes Cecil. Took a bit of grass before the entry of the Variante Tamburello. Fabiano Bartoletti holds his nerve, then the 26 remains in 9th. Now 1.2 seconds, 1.3 on the exit of Tamburello, ahead of Richard Cecil. We want to see if we can catch on board the attacking point of view. Another drive-through penalty, this time for Julio Bahena, in trouble there on his first race. So we cut away from Bartoletti. Now we're on board with the attacking point of view, Richard Cecil. Normally he's been on the defending side of things, so it's must be a breath of fresh air for him to finally be on the offense. 10 minutes left to go. Quickly checking in on the state of affairs going on in second and third. Badiali v Vilorio has massively distanced themselves over the course of the last 7 minutes. So we're still on with Cecil and Bartoletti here, getting closer and closer and closer now on the exit of turn 19 to begin lap 26 here in Imola. This could be it for Richard Cecil. He's in the slipstream on Bartoletti. He's got the best run possible. Those two separated on that last lap by 5 thousandths of a second on lap time alone. Cecil trying his way to the inside, trying to get inside Bartoletti's head now, fighting the thinking man's war for 9th place. Getting up with a helmet cam here just to give you an indication as to what these two are going through on the way into Villeneuve. Also gives you a little bit of an understanding of the ebb and flow here. Some of that momentum being tossed around in the Astons. Making their way now in towards turn 7. Bear in mind, they're going to be feeling a little bit more spry on the Pirellis as they've got 10 kilos shed off in balance of performance. So they ought to feel quite snappy today. Up through turn 8 then as we mount the crest in toward turn 9. And now there is absolutely nothing between them. You can see not too far up the road as it stands right now is John Prine. Now he slipped back a little bit, was very nearly in the iron sights of Bartoletti not a moment ago. Now it could be a two-pronged defensive for Aston Martin up against the 22 Chevrolet. If these two keep on the form they're at the moment, there's not a lot to say that Prine can't be caught. Cutting there over the Variante Alta. That could be maybe the straw that breaks the camel's back and the stewarding decisions for Bartoletti. We've seen quite a few drive-through penalties be dished out. Most recently was to Julio Bahena. Now we see with Richard Cecil trying perhaps his way to the inside finally at long last. Goes for the dive on the 26 and this time he holds it. So it was quite ambitious by Richard Cecil, but he's finally found the golden ratio, licked the stamp and sent it down through Ravazza. But bear in mind, he's got the whole straightaway here before we get back to Tambirello, and this is giving all manner of benefit to Bartoletti. He's right in the slipstream. It's a full train of Aston Martins on their way down towards turns 2, 3 and 4, trying for the outside to the more aggressive of the two racing lines. Goes Bartoletti, absolutely glued there to Richard Cecil, but now with fresh air over the front aero, he's not got a lot to waste here. The 5 opens the taps there, now half a second between himself and Bartoletti by the time we hit the Variante Villeneuve. And washed out there, that was John Prine. He's dropped a lot of time. Could Richard Cecil go 2 for the price of 1? He's already up to 9th, and now as he makes his way round turn 7, looks upon the chances of 8th. And that very well could be double trouble there for Richard Cecil. He has absolutely nailed that one there. The perfect storm to give him 8th position. Down through Piratella we go. Meanwhile, in the background, you can see there the very quickly emerging sight. That neon green flash in the distance can only indicate one thing. That's Clinton Bourne in the Chevrolet number 6. Down through Aqua Minerale, we could have a 4-man fight here for 8th position. Richard Cecil leads the charge now. John Prine in 9th place. Bartoletti in 10th and Bourne in 11th. You see here, the sort of provisional middle of that pack here would either be Prine or Bartoletti. Bartoletti's got a clear line of sight on Prine, making his way down towards Ravazza. Absolutely still in that fight for 9th, but he's also got to consider his odds here, and that is if one slip up is made in his efforts to get around the 22. Look who's right behind him. That is the number 6 of Clinton Bourne, and he does not look too happy. So on the straightaway we go, as straight as things realistically get here on this track. It is still 2 corners there, turn 19 and turn 1, but the drivers will be keeping things absolutely pinned, foot to the floor there for the throttle. down towards the Variante Tamburello, trying to get inside Prine's head there. You can see Bartoletti tries to hold centre mass, even has a little flick there to the left, maybe to suggest, oh, I might try and go up the inside. Realistically, something like that would almost entirely be a collision. Down towards Villeneuve. Now, I want to quickly draw attention to something that is going on up the order here. De Tosto versus Forest, and they run into lap traffic right in front of them there. That's the number 36, I believe, of Alex Albert. We take a look here. Yes, that is the 36. So that is an up-and-coming story here. We've been watching with Bartoletti for that fight of night. Let's just quickly catch on board with Bartoletti as he eyes up John Prine. Down into Piratella we go. And a drive-through penalty now for Kevin Quain. So another victim claimed here by Imola's track limits. With 4.5 minutes to spare, that has come at the worst possible time for what would have otherwise been a good recovery by Kevin Quain today. It has gone much in the same story for Gaudreau, from bad to worse. Bartoletti, this could be a real make or break situation, because he finds himself not only battling for ninth, but this is very quickly, as Kevin Quain peels to the pit lane, is going to become that fight for eighth. This could be his all-time, in terms of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, this could be his all-time best result. It's previously been held at ninth here, and it's been upwards momentum for the Brazilian talent since his late entry to the championship. This could be a real deal for him. Just quickly double checking what's going on with De Tosto and Forest. We can see De Tosto getting up and around the 36 there of Alex Albert. Quain's on his way out. Here comes Richard Cecil, so he's up to 7th. That puts John Prine in 8th, Fabiano Bartoletti in 9th, Clinton Bourne into the top 10. When everything updates there. That updates the fight to 8th as well. Bear in mind, he may be out of the fire, as it were, for not being evicted to the back of the top 10 and not seeing an overall improvement to his best result this season. But he is he's not exactly out of the woods here. I'm not really sure where the analogy was going. I think I was supposed to say he's not out of the frying pan, but he is into the fire, because he has got Clinton Bourne there on both barrels firing at him in the number 6. You can see he's absolutely crushed in amongst the two Chevys. This could get nuclear down towards the Acqua Minerale. This is all for contention of 8th position. Prine from Bartoletti from Bourne. Now on the run uphill, down towards the Variante Alta. And that is absolutely mighty, but it has all gone horribly, horribly wrong for him. Oh, no, no, no. That is horrible to see. We definitely saw the ambition for a move there, and it was pretty much as the words were leaving my mouth. If he had been able to hold that move, that would have been great. The cameras didn't give us the best of angles, because by the time we were able to come to our senses, it was already too late. That is catastrophic for Fabiano Bartoletti. An absolute heartbreak there. Had that move stuck, that would have been one of the greatest moves of this race, albeit a bit cheeky, as it was quite the hefty cut down at the start of the Variante Alta. That's all come apart. It's not come apart, though, for Richard Cecil. He's 7th now in today's race. John Prine down at 8th. Clinton Bourne is right on his tail right now as Christian LeBay starts that last lap. Let's get on board, though, with these two in their fight for 8th. This looks to be a proper solid scrap here amongst the American muscle cars. 22 versus 6 then. Prine versus Bourne. Down through Variante Villeneuve. Bourne's had him for breakfast there. Can he have him for lunch and supper as he makes his way to Tosa at turn 7? He's to the outside on the 22. He's going to have the worst of the two runs on exit. Now as we head up, he'll be back into the slipstream by the time we hit turn 8. This could get very, very spicy here as we enter among the final laps of today's race. Bear in mind, Christian LeBay is behind them, so these two will have one more lap around Imola before they can settle the score. It's contact, but he manages to hold it. My word, John Prine has held his nerve there. That is a code brown for the 22. Had ever I seen one, that was genuinely frightening from our point of view. And it very nearly becomes contact again as we make our way uphill on the exit of Acqua Minerale. This is absolutely neck and neck between the pair. The number 6 trying for around the outside at Alta, goes very early on the brakes to try and undercut Just can't find it. Can't find it. Perhaps won't find it. Only time will tell us different. They've got one more lap, so we'll catch up with them in a moment's time as we take a look on board here with Christian Lebay. Now, there's plenty of fights going on around the field as we speak here. But a man who has been otherwise quite distant from them all for another dominant performance today on the chances of his 7th win in a row in this championship. Can anyone in their right mind stand in the way of the indomitable stride on display here by the 119? A bit of a spin, it becomes a half spin, then a clatter to the wall in the background for Gabriel Gaudreau, but taking centre stage is a 7th win on the charts for Christian Lebay, who wins in Imola. So away from the race win, just for a moment to take a look at where the rest of the field stacks up. Badiali in second, a proper revenge drive on home soil for the 998. Anthony Valorio third, but there are so many stories yet to wrap up. Byron Forrest on his joint best result this season for 4th place. Timo de Tosto looks to be in 5th, Martel 6th, Cecil 7th, Bourne in 8th, Quain in 9th, Prine in 10th. Bartoletti in a reluctant P11. The pangs of just pure agony after that incident down at Alta. That has got to sting something fierce. Bahena on debut then, 13th, but perhaps celebrating a bit early here. Very nearly took himself into the pit lane. Do be careful. To the line then, Julio Bahena, 13th on debut. It's close. It is very close in the middle sector there between Quain and Bourne. But running just a little too deep out through the Aqua Minerale. I think that has really cemented where things stand right now for Kevin Quain. A race perhaps to forget. That's what the drop points are here for. As we see further around the field, Carl Markle on a very understated drive to 6th place. Very well done to the number 99. Another solid points tenure for Chevrolet. Richard Cecil then on his way to the line with Aston Martin has fought through thick and thin here for the 7th place he covets today here in Imola. At the end of round 5, he's 7th. Clinton Bourne off by 8 seconds, but has definitely fought things back from beyond the grave, so it were. He was slammed out through Tambirello at the starting lap, fights it back to 8th. That is a very, very clear and likely pick for driver of the day. Kevin Quain in 9th, John Prine on his way to the line in 10th. We'll get a full readout in a moment's time. Bottom line is, 7th win on the chart for Christian Lebay, an unstoppable drive. Badiali 2nd, Valorio 3rd, Byron Forrest in 4th, Timo de Tosto 5th, Carl Martel 6th, Richard Cecil in 7th, Clinton Bourne 8th, Kevin Quain 9th, and John Prine in 10th. Fabiano Bartoletti in a very reluctant P11 after that incident at the Variante Alta. We just covered Bartoletti there. So Veldkamp 12th, Julio Bahena on debut to the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malois Transport and AssurAction Transport Expert. Oh my God, that's a long title. Is in 13th. Alex Albert in 14th. Richard Lynch 15th, Gabriel Gaudreau in 16th, Christophe Dupois in 17th. A hectic and wild ride here in Imola, capped off by a 7th win in a row for Christian Lebay. A very hectic fight amongst Badiali and Valorio, and plenty of solid fights from all around the grid. What a drive it has been on all fronts for all drivers today. Perhaps a race to forget for some, but a very, very iconic one in this championship for many. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much for our sponsors as well for this championship. Malois Transport and AssurAction Transport Expert. Wouldn't be possible to bring you these performances without their continued support. That's all from us here today. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. If you're tuning in for our next stream, it'll be according to BST, so British summertime. That will be at 7:30 this coming evening, Wednesday 17th of September, for the next round of the VSR Phoenix Season 9 series, I should say, as they enter the Porsche Cup era. That's all from us here. Take care. Good night.